Welcome to another edition of the live Ask a Private Investigator stream. I'm going to talk about a couple issues today that have to do with divorce cases. That's one of the most common cases we work on. Another type of case we work on is litigation support for attorneys. So we're going to talk about some summary judgment, how to get rid of a case. If you have a case that you're working with an attorney or you are an attorney, what the rules are for getting a summary judgment to get the case thrown out against you or to get a summary judgment in your favor. So those are two that we'll start with. As you know, make sure that if you have any questions, you email them to our help desk, help@activeintel, or you can type them into the help channel and we can take a look at those. So we get that pulled up on our screen. So the first question that we're going to work with has to do with a divorce case. I have a client that has some questions about how to handle two threats in a divorce case. One of the threats is how to handle hidden assets. The other is how to handle potential infiltration of electronic devices. Right? In this case, there are possible intrusions on electronic devices, meaning that their phones, their tablets, their laptops may be hacked. So other parties, maybe the spouse, maybe the attorney for the spouse, maybe some other party is monitoring their emails, forwarding their emails, monitoring their communications. So how do you handle that? And how do you find assets? In the case of assets, this is something we've had videos before. The first thing you want to do is get the court-required asset disclosure done by the counterparty. So if you're in a divorce, in most states, there's a requirement that the other side has to produce a disclosure record of all assets in advance of the case. Now, as normal, with all of the things we talk about on this video, all of the suggestions we give, remember, this is not legal advice. We're not attorneys. We're not providing legal advice. We're not practicing law. These are suggestions that you want to work with your attorney, or these are things we've seen in other cases. It may not apply to your case. It may not apply in your scenario. So make sure that you're using this as a guideline or reference of potential creative ideas to work with your attorney or to get good legal advice out here. We're not attorneys. We're not giving legal advice. Right? That being said, if you have a case that's a divorce case and there may be assets concealed by the other side, the first thing you want to do is have the other side disclose at least what they're saying are the assets. Once you get that documented, it's much easier to dispute that later. If you do an asset search and then find hidden assets, it's harder to dispute what the other side is saying if you don't get it documented first. So have the other side do their normal financial disclosure. Every state usually has a version of that for any divorce case or child custody case or child support case. Get that documented. That way, when you do your asset search and you find any discrepancies, you can serve that upon the court to show that the person is acting in bad faith, potentially. With regard to electronic devices, this is much more prevalent now than it has been in the past. We've seen cases where the other side in the divorce has put monitoring or tracking devices on a computer, on a laptop, on cell phones, on tablets, even on vehicle electronic systems, on your Android Auto or your Apple CarPlay or the GPS system in your vehicle. Other parties, third parties, can put devices on there to monitor your travel history, to monitor your emails, to monitor your text messages, to monitor what photos are taken. It can even trigger your mobile device to take a photo without your knowledge, right? So if you're just walking around with your phone and you have your phone out, it can monitor for activity to see if there's movement on your phone that indicates it might be up in the air or facing vertical, and then tell that phone to take a photo so the monitoring person can tell where you are or see what your surroundings are. The hacking availability also includes the option to track vehicle activities. Is the door open? Is the door closed? Did the car start? How fast is it going? Were there text messages going through your Android Auto? So the first thing you want to do is, if you have any concern about your personal safety or your well-being, make sure you call local law enforcement and call 911 if it's urgent. Beyond that, you want to make sure that you're defending your devices against intrusion. First of all, make sure the devices stay in your control. It's easier to install these hacking apps on your phone if the phone is outside of your control. However, these hacking devices can be installed remotely. So even if the phone is in your hand at all times, somebody can install these on your phone by sending a malicious text or email, or sometimes even going through your router at your home or office. If you have concerns about that, there are methods to have your devices have a digital forensics audit. And we have a department that does digital forensics. They can screen and scrub your phones to see what's on there. And they can also determine the source of any malicious devices or apps that are on your phone. So if you're concerned about that, we had a client we talked to this week that saw their mouse moving by itself. It even went so far as to see that emails were being forwarded without the person doing anything. Their hands were off the computer and they saw an email being clicked, forwarded, so that somebody else was seeing them. So looking at the source of that malicious activity is very important. Another clue to that was that one of their work computers was going to blue screen, what they call blue screen of death, if it's a Windows computer, on a regular basis, where it was shutting down the computer. And sometimes that's an indication that there could be some hacking device or hacking activity on the computer. If you have any kind of a dispute, whether it's a business dispute, a divorce case, those are the two most common adverse activities that could be happening to you. One is hidden assets, concealed assets. The other is electronic intrusion or infiltration of your devices. Again, whether it's a cell phone, a laptop computer, mobile device, vehicle information infotainment system has a lot of details about you. It has your driving activity. If you're hooked up to your text messages or phones, it'll track that. It can even download all your contacts without your knowledge. So be aware, you want to protect your electronic devices at all costs. We have some other videos about that. The second subject we'll go to, because we already have this question come up, and we'll see if any more come in on live chat or through the email, has to do with summary judgment. And again, don't construe this to be legal advice. This is to be used by an attorney or with conjunction of attorney. But if you have a court case, the ideal scenario would be, if it's a court case against you, to have it thrown out. If you have a court case against somebody else, to have it be declared a judgment in your favor without going through the whole trial or litigation. It saves you a lot of court costs. It saves you attorney's fees. And it gets the matter resolved quickly. So if you have, what you would call a slam dunk case or open and shut case, there's a method to use what's called a summary judgment. And again, legal advice, have your attorney explain this to you, to have the case be declared in your favor by a judge before you have to go through all of the back and forth of a litigation. And there was an important change in summary judgment in the state of Florida, and we'll pull it up on the screen to show that. This is a news article, and this was actually by a law firm, Ogletree Deakins. Not familiar with them, but they actually had a very good article about this recent case. It was on December 31st, Florida Supreme Court rendered an opinion in this case, amendments to Florida Rule of Civil Procedure. And it was basically making the rules in Florida the same as the federal standards for summary judgment motions. And there's a lot of legal talk and legalese in here, but the one thing to keep in mind is that prior to this decision, in order to prevail on a summary judgment, you had to remove any slightest doubt as to the dispute of the facts. So if you went to the judge and said, I want a summary judgment in my favor, unless there was no doubt, no slightest doubt, the judge had to keep the case going, right? After this new opinion, allegedly, and again, you want to get good legal advice to make sure this is correct. Don't take our word for it. But it seems that rather than require the moving party to dispute or negate any claims, the new standard would simply require the moving party to point out that there is an absence of evidence to support the other party's side. So if you have all your evidence presented and the other side has no evidence, you win. According to this, that's oversimplification. But this is a good example of where if you are preparing for a court case and you do a good investigation, this is some of the types of investigations we do, to have all of your evidence laid out on a silver platter to make it open and shut. And if the other side has any evidence that you're negating that you're eliminating it because you show that it's not true, you show that it's false, you show that it's not properly collected. And if you make that into an absence of evidence, then the court would presumably be able to support your summary judgment. And the reason they do this, and this is what the opinion said, is the purpose of a summary judgment is to isolate and dispose of factually unsupported claims and defenses, meaning that if the other side, if their case is unsupported factually or doesn't have enough information to say it's true, then you win. That way you don't have to waste the court's time. And the court said that the summary judgment should be interpreted in a way that allows this to proceed, allows this to accomplish. And then it talks about the rule amendment, why they're doing it, and what the Supreme Court in Florida used to do. It also is trying to improve fairness and efficiency and to spare the parties with undue costs with meritless litigation. That's the key. If you're doing an investigation to support your litigation, you want to have the investigation show that the other side's case is meritless. And it's trying to save the work for juries where there are real factual disputes that need resolution. So again, the court is trying to say, look, we don't want to waste our time with cases that are factually insufficient. We want to work on cases that really need courts and juries. That being said, if you do a thorough, complete investigation of your case's merits and you can present that evidence, and then you can do anything to erode or dispute or to negate the other side's presentations of evidence, you may be able to have a higher prevalence of success with a summary judgment. Again, get good legal advice, contact an attorney. This is not legal advice. The summary of this is, what does it mean? It goes into effect May 1st, so you still have a few months. Assuming that the amendment goes into effect, parties may have a greater chance at succeeding on motions for summary judgment in Florida State Court, right? In order to have that greater chance, you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, that your case is properly investigated and documented and supported, and the other side's claims are properly disputed, eroded, or erased as non-factual. And you can do that through an investigation, or your attorney can do it through discovery or prior court cases. Again, this is just as the attorney said, the content of this article is to provide general guide, not specific advice for your case. And the attorney says that, and we're saying the same thing. And we don't have any connection to this attorney. We're glad that this particular firm described this very complex matter in easy to understand terms, 5 or 6 paragraphs, 1 page of text. They seem like they're very qualified in doing this, but it's an important type of scenario to look at when you have a court case to try to eliminate it quickly. Look, if you lose a summary judgment, you can still proceed with your case and possibly prevail on your case. So that's a good thing to do. See if we have any other questions on the email. All right, we do have a question that pertains to whether or not law enforcement will assist with a certain type of case. So let's see if we can read more about this. Looks like it looks like there's a third party, and they're wondering if they have a secret bank account and if it's being used specifically for a certain type of transaction that they're investigating, illegal transaction. They check the phone number, and so this phone number is on the bank records, and it's also on the this person's mobile device. So it's a good question. In this case, if you're looking to see if a particular person is using a bank account to do something illegal, especially if you have records from that bank account that reference a certain phone number, there's 2 investigations you would do. One is on the bank account and on the asset side. One is on the phone number side. It looks like this person tried to do some basic phone number lookups, maybe on Google, maybe who knows where. And it looks like that phone number is associated with multiple people. So the first thing you want to do is get to the bottom of that phone number. Who actually is using that phone number? If it is multiple people, it could be some type of drop phone or burner phone or a corporate phone, and you want to find out who's using it when. On the bank account side, you want to see when those transactions took place, and if so, what were they associated with? The one thing you don't want to do is burn that phone number. If you call up the phone number and say, "Who's this? We're checking you out," sometimes then the phone number will go dark and you won't be able to find anything out. If you do a proper investigation or have a professional do an investigation, you may be able to find what that phone's being used for. And before you make the call, you're going to find out the context of what type of conversation the person on the other end of that phone would be comfortable in hearing without hanging up or blocking the phone. Sometimes if it's an illegal transaction, the person is open to certain types of inquiries, but if they suspect it's an investigation or law enforcement, they'll block the phone. So you don't want to do that. Will a law enforcement agency get involved with this? In most cases, law enforcement does not get involved with something they consider to be civil matter, like a dispute between parties, or something which is a lower level of even criminal. Some states and counties and jurisdictions won't get involved with something unless it hits a certain threshold of money, certain threshold of severity. Obviously, if there's physical injury or threats or assault involved, they usually get involved. Either way, you want to make the inquiry to law enforcement in most cases. Again, you might want to get legal advice to make sure you're not creating any liability for yourself. You don't want to call the cops on somebody that doesn't deserve to be investigated, because you could be create liability for yourself for harassment. But if it's a legitimate case and you get good legal advice, or you believe your well-being is in jeopardy, at least notifying law enforcement to make sure that they don't want to open the case. You get a case number, you get a police report. So if something happens later, you have it documented. And sometimes they'll take the case, but usually on civil matters, they won't take the case. So let's take a look and see what other types of inquiries we have. All right, so this is a online scam. This one happened through YouTube, right? So this happens occasionally. There are some scammers that start their fraud on YouTube. The one thing about YouTube is they're very good at shutting down fraud. So if there's a case where there is a Ponzi scheme, a fraudster, they're operating on YouTube, it will probably be one of the first to shut that down. Sometimes on Instagram or Twitter, it'll last a little bit longer, but YouTube will shut it down pretty quick. But if you do have some scam that originated on YouTube or has some video on YouTube, make a note of it. See if you can take screenshots of the video so that you can use that later if the site goes down. The other thing you can do on most videos, there's a button you can push on the right-hand side that will give you the transcription of that video. Like whatever was spoken in the video, it'll print it out in words for you. So you can save that as a text file. That way you'll have the evidence if it's needed later. You won't find too many scams, financial scams on YouTube because they're much more vigilant about watching them. But if somebody has an Instagram that's doing a scam or a Twitter that's doing a scam, they may have a YouTube video that's related to it that's not 100% of a scam, but is supporting that fraud. Document it. Get a copy of the video, get a copy of the transcription, and save that because you may need it later for an investigation. But that's a good question. YouTube fraud is very rare, but you may find that it pops up occasionally, but it gets shut down pretty quick. Another question on the chat, it says, in your personal opinion, was the investigation of election fraud done in a fair manner throughout the nation? Really, it's unknown. It's too complex of an investigation to really be able to have an opinion on. With 50 different states and something at the federal level and all kind of agencies involved, it's too complex really unless you would spend hundreds of hours looking at all the documents, which we haven't done, to really know if that's the case. So that's really more of a question for larger scale organizations, whether private or public sector. It's really unknown. It's beyond the scope of what typical investigation would know about. It is a good question, though. Very, very good question. Let's see what else we have on email. All right, here's one that's another online scam. Won't mention the company. It was some trading company where they sent originally about $1,400. And then afterwards, they said that their profit was almost $5,000, but they can't withdraw it, right? This is common. This is very, very common. If you see this type of fraud attempted, it's probably a red flag that the organization's a scam or a Ponzi, right? Not 100%, but it's a red flag. This is how a lot of these frauds go. They'll ask you for a relatively small amount of money, 500, 800, 1,000. This one was 1,400, which is a little higher than what we normally see for a first attempt. They take that money, and usually it is represented as a good investment. You're going to make a lot of money, okay? Within a week or two or three, they'll send you a statement saying, hey, your 1,400 is now $3,000, $5,000, $6,000, whatever it is. It'll be a much higher amount, usually about double, a little more than double. And then they'll say you made a lot of money, and they'll ask you to put more money in. Look, if you doubled 1,400 or tripled 1,400, if you put in another 1,000, it'll go up even more. Or they might ask you for another 2,000. And a lot of it depends on what they feel like your comfort level is with putting in money. Okay. So if you Send them more money, they'll do the same thing again. They'll show your account went up and they'll ask you for more. As soon as you ask for money back, here's what they're going to do. Whatever your supposed balance is, right, which is going to be more than you put in. If you put in a total of, let's say, $2,500, they might say, look, you have $8,000 in your account because your investment went up in value. Okay, that's great. And then when you look to withdraw it, what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, the minimum amount is X amount of dollars. It's always going to be a little bit more than what you have in there. Okay, so let's say you have 8,000 in there. They might say minimum withdrawal is 10,000. We can't send a withdrawal anything less than 10,000. So what they'll then do is they'll say, if you want to wait a little bit to see if it goes up, then when it gets to 10,000, you can take it out. Or if you want to put in the difference, then you can withdraw. It's another way of asking you for money. We've seen some scams that have gone even farther, is to have it go up a little bit at a time and then stop. So that way, if the $2,000 seems like too much for you to send in, they'll make your account go up to 8,800. So now you only have to put in another 1,200. It's very diabolical. But if you see any minimum withdrawals or asking for more money, a lot of times it's an indication of a scam, and you might want to do some research on the company to see if there's other reports of scams, because it's pretty common scenario. Let's take a look at any other questions. This one's a question about locating a missing relative that's in the military. And the good thing about the military is they have a family relations division where you can contact if you're worried about a family member in the military. Depending upon what your relationship is and what division, what branch they're in, it's Army, Navy. They have a way to, they may not be able to get you in contact with the person if they're in a place that doesn't have contact, or if it's in a place where they're not sure you're the relative. Sometimes they can at least give you a well-being update. So contact the branch of the military they're in. Ask for their family relations department division. They have different names for it in each branch. And if you can show reasonable proof that you're related to the person, they may not be able to give you their contact information or say where they are. They might be able to at least give you a well-being update and maybe pass along a message to request that person contacts you. In this case, the person saying, it's their close relative and they have all their information, social security number. So that's something that is likely to be the case. Yeah, so here's another question about online investments, where there's, in this case, they're saying Facebook groups, many social media groups that have to do with any kind of investment. You're going to get some shady operators in any online social media group that are trying to get people to lose money in some way. Sometimes it's to boost up stocks. Sometimes it's to promote other types of investments, like real estate investments. I'm going to pull up an article about another investment that we read about this week. Pull up on the screen while we do this. Where, see if that's still there. Yeah, it is. If somebody is trying to boost or inflate a stock, in many cases, like in this comment, it's a penny stock. A good way to do that is to go onto some of these online chat rooms or online message rooms and say good things about this stock. And if it's a very thinly traded stock and it's a low trigger point, transaction price, it doesn't take much to make a lot of money. If it's a 5-cent stock and you can say some things about it that boosts it up by 3 cents to 7 cents, it doesn't seem like much, but that's a 60% increase, right? Or 60% increase in value. And if you put $50,000 in it, you could make $30,000 profit by artificially boosting that up. And the question comes up is, does the government monitor the individuals? They don't necessarily monitor individuals. In our experience, we've seen that government agencies, usually the SEC, sometimes the FBI, will monitor some of these chat rooms to see if there's anything egregious. They can't chase down every case because there are literally hundreds of thousands of these scammers that are out there trying to boost up Ponzi schemes and penny stocks and real estate scams. So they can't chase them all because there's too many. But what they will do is they'll see if there's any one operator that's doing more than one at the same time, right? That's showing up in more than one place, and maybe start an investigation. Sometimes these investigations take a long time. Sometimes they are very complicated. And the people who are doing it, for example, on these Facebook groups, they're going to use fake identities and fake usernames and profiles. So they may not be easy to find right away. And like we said before, where the government agency looks at this as a civil matter until it becomes a larger scale, sometimes they're monitoring it to see if any of them cross the threshold into a large enough operation, a fraud operation, to take action. And here's a good example of one, right? This one had to do with a real estate scam, but this is something that we've seen many cases like this. This was a large real estate investment scheme where the CEO that used to run it allegedly was doing some scam. And what he was saying was, or what the SEC is saying, that it was a scheme to fraudulently induce hundreds of individuals to invest. Well, even though this was a real estate scheme, it's the same as what this other person just asked about in the chat, where they said sketchy individuals promoting certain penny stocks, right? That's a way to induce individuals to invest. And that's really what a scam boils down to, inducing somebody to invest. In this case, they induced people to invest $50 million into funds. And the way they did it was they made false representations. They lied about their experience and they lied about the characteristics of the funds. I think that in this case, they also lied to say that these properties were unencumbered by debt. Yeah, right here. He lied to the client saying that the funds were free of debt and leased to corporate clients. Apparently, allegedly, that wasn't the case. These were, encumbered properties. He promised his clients that they would reap the benefits of owning equity in Manhattan real estate. Allegedly, that wasn't true. What happened was there were two investment funds, MG Capital and MG Capital Residential. Actually, there was two residentials, 3 and 4. He also bragged about two extremely successful prior funds he had formed. But apparently that wasn't true. He also said that the funds would be and were debt-free. Apparently that wasn't true. It said instead he held mortgage properties and that the properties were leased to individual, not corporate tenants. So here we are, $50 million worth of investment coming from people saying with the belief that these were corporate properties leased to corporate tenants and that they were free and clear of debt. And allegedly, according to the SEC and the FBI, they had mortgages and that they were leased to individuals. Okay, investors, entirety of their investment savings, lost all of their investments. It breaks down some of the different cases. And again, at this point, it's merely accusations. Defendant is proved innocent till proven guilty. It's a normal thing. This is alleged. This is not convicted, right? And the FBI got involved. So this gets back to the question: does the government monitor individuals? Well, they do monitor some things, obviously, because there's a case that was prosecuted, arrested. But they don't monitor all of them, and they allocate their resources based on priority. It could be that if it's a large-scale operation, then they're going to investigate it. It could be that if they get a lot of complaints about a certain organization or investment, they're going to investigate it. It may be something where it's a known prior fraudster. They may investigate it. sometimes it's luck of the draw, right? It's not going to get a full investigation every time, only because there's only so many resources the government agencies have. Sometimes the squeaky wheel will get the oil, meaning that if you file complaints and you have other investors that are victims that you find that can file complaints, that's helpful. If you can go onto these chat rooms and find other people who have been victimized by the same fraud company, and you can get more than one person to file a complaint, sometimes that helps. So the nature of government monitoring, as the person asked the question, is somewhat subjective. You may find that sometimes a small scale operation will get busted where a larger scale operation does not, and maybe random luck of the draw. But in general, these cases eventually will either blow up because they run out of money or become prosecuted because of government oversight. So that was a good question. Make sure you click the subscribe button so you're notified when we have another live stream of Ask an Investigator. These were good questions. In the meantime, you can always email our help desk, help@activeintel.com, and we'll save the questions for the following week. If you do have a need to speak with an investigator, you can reach our website, teleclient.com. You see the link up at the top, where we can arrange a consultation with a live private investigator. And if you do have other questions, you can reach our website, activeintel.com. There's a phone number there if you want to call up. In the meantime, have a good rest of the week.